All right, y'all. So the end of the college football season, at least the regular season, is upon us. We're getting to the ball game. So I wanted to dive into some football, more football related content outside of just games and players. So I love football, college football movies, of course. One of them being, well, one of my favorites being the program dropping in 1993, starring James Caan as head coach, Sam Winters. We also got Omar Epps in this one, starring running back Darnell Jefferson. We also got Halle Berry in this one as well. Now, what makes this one of my favorite movies, at least in terms of college football, is the fact that like many other college football movies, it depicts the progression of the regular season. What I like about this one in particular is the way that it tells the story of Eastern State University's season through the perspectives of these different characters, including the head coach. We also got Darnell Jefferson's perspective, as well as the starting quarterback, Joe Kane. For example, with Sam Winters, he's much like Pacino's character in Any Given Sunday. Now, he once was a prominent head coach who's won his championships, but now he's hitting a rough patch, and he needs to pull off a winning season this year in order to save his job. Now, he does have some top talent returning on both sides of the ball for his team, including linebacker Alvin Mack and defensive end Steve Latimer, as well as I mentioned Joe Kane. Now, again, like I said, the story that revolves around these characters goes so deep, at least in my opinion, and it covers just more than just putting on pads and just playing in the game and just winning and losing. For like I said, with these other characters such as Joe Kane, we are a witness to his rough upbringing and the dysfunctional relationship that we have with his dad. We don't necessarily see his childhood, but we see how it's manifests itself in this particular stage right now for Kane. And his dad is pretty much absentee, meaning he doesn't show up to any of the games. Even in the climax of the movie, the most important game of the season, in which Joe actually reaches out to him and says, "Please show up for me. Here's some tickets." His father still doesn't show up, and we see through this this relationship that they have, and just the negative aspects going on at home, that he uses football as this way to get away from that. But the cold part about Kane's character, as much as he uses this to relieve the stress at home, he's thrust into this position in the limelight because of being a quarterback and being a solid quarterback at that. And in the movie, this is his Heisman run in this in this plot. Now, he has to go through, again, he started off just playing this sport as a way to just kind of get himself out of his situation. Now he has to constantly be, criticized and analyzed about his performances as a quarterback. And so there's this other lining, effect here. Like, okay, he uses to get away from the stresses at home, but it's becoming a whole different stress factor within himself, because again, there's these elevated expectations for him. And again, he's playing at the most important position in the sport, which is the quarterback. And again, like I mentioned, this is his Heisman run. He's put himself out there on the national level. He was not expecting this. Again, that was not his original goal going into this. Of course, he wants to be the best player to get a scholarship and all this, but we do know the underlining of, hey, I need to get away from my father. I need to do my own thing and establish myself and make myself feel good outside of where I came from. And football becomes this complicated matter. And so you see this progression of this player having to find an outlet outside of football, because again, that was originally his outlet, but now it's not. So he finds himself drinking and overall being reckless with his motorcycle. He has to have it taken away from him by the head coach, because again, he gets into, first of all, he breaks curfew. And later on in the movie, you'll see things like him getting into a DUI. He gets into a fight with a patron at a bar. All these things spiraling because the original the original vehicle in which he would use to escape stress has become the ultimate stress, which is, of course, football. But one thing that does help him out in his character arc, his progression, is a relationship that he develops with another character by the name of Camille, who is also another student athlete. She is a tennis player. And they develop this bond. And what's important about their bond, at least in my opinion, from the outside looking in, is she holds him accountable. And I'm guessing because she's an athlete just like he is, she doesn't back down. She checks him. She makes sure that he's on top of his game. And a lot of us guys, we look at those type of women and we get turned down. We get turned off by those women. That's a little bit masculine, or that's a little bit too much for us. But in reality, in that type of relationship, she's probably going to be one of the most important people around for him. But think about it. At this point, his father's not around. There's no mother to speak of. We don't know where she is in the mix. And it's just him and his father. And his father ain't even really got his back. So then it's just him, and then the media, and then all the trouble and the anxiety from playing sports. Camille comes in here as this force of, don't break down. Don't support your bad habits. Learn to get out of that. Use your sport, use your, other good qualities about you to navigate yourself out of the situation. And again, he almost self-sabotages this relationship, again, by going back into those bad habits that leads him going to rehab for 28 days over the course of the season. He misses 3 games. He does come back, and like I said, like I mentioned, he leads them to a victory in the final game of the year, which saves Sam's career. They get to that ball game, that coveted ball game, and he does fall short of the Heisman expectations. Of course, he had to go through all these different things, but he grows as a human being, and he comes into the next season, and it's suspected that he comes into the next season even more mature, even more ready to go get it. And who knows what happens the next season. But again, he needed to go through those ups and those downs, and he had a great person beside him, pushing him and staying by him and keeping him accountable. Now, we also have Darnell Jefferson's character. He gives you the freshman experience. We are showcase. Well, we are originally seen. Well, he's originally seen in the movie, being courted by Coach Winters. He goes down to his neighborhood. He's talking to the male figure in his life. He's trying to sell the school, that being Coach Winters, and he's getting Darnell to kind of to see that this is the space that he wants to be. Darnell, he takes the visit down to Eastern University. He sees the campus. These are all things that go on within that process. And I respect movies that always show you the inner work to some extent of what goes on. Even scenes. What scenes in the movie The Blind Side, where all these coaches are coming in visiting Michael Orr, telling him, come to my university, come down to my school. I like all that because that is reflective of truly what goes on. But for Darnell, same type of situation. He goes down to campus. He meets up with the quarterback, Joe. He meets up with some of the other defensive players. He also meets up with a tutor, Autumn Haley, who is played by Halle Berry. They also develop a strong relationship, too, based on her being or holding him accountable for his schoolwork. Now, originally, he comes in there just, again, kind of, iffy on what to take serious, strictly football or his academics. Through her, he finds somewhat of a balance and is also, he, again, becomes a better player on the field, but he also becomes a better student through her help and through her being on top of him to some extent. Now, just at least lighting the fire. Not saying making him do anything, because he's a man. He has to be able to want to do it himself, right? But no, she at least lights the fire and she keeps him focused. Now, there's a little bit more to that relationship because she is currently dating. At the time that they originally meet, she was currently dating the starting running back at the time, Ray Griffin. Now, that would create some friction. She would try to play off Darnell's character when he was first introduced to her father, because, again, he's from a different side of the, he's from the hood, da-da-da-da-da. She tried to play him off, try to, make him insignificant. That ruffles some feathers, but eventually they would develop this relationship. And again, Ray, he would understand what it is. He moved on, and they would become better teammates, that being Ray and Darnell. But also, like we said, Darnell, coming in there as a freshman, he was initially not stated to, he wasn't slated to be the starter at first, and he did struggle. He would fumble at practice. There's a scene where coach, pretty much makes him walk around with his football all day on campus, 24/7. You see the other players trying to make him drop the ball. He has to hold on to it. There's a scene where they're in class, they're all trying to get after the fumble. He ends up on top of the ball. It's hilarious. I mean, so you have these things going on, and I feel like it, for what it's worth, this movie here, it makes those nods to all these different things that go on in college football, at least football in general, between the coaches and its players and the dialogues and some of the situations that happen. I know plenty of stories, and I've seen it happen where players were, I mean, it's funny because how true it is. I've seen it happen. Players be forced to rock around school with that football, and people come at them and make them try to. It's real, or if they fumble, they gotta run. It's just what it is. I've seen it happen. But again, some other characters in which this plot really does a good job of highlighting are the two defensive stalwarts that I mentioned in the beginning, Alvin Mack and Steve Latimer. And they're so important, I feel, to the situation because they they represent playing the game in two different ways. Now Mac, he is physical, but he's a true student of the game. There's a scene where they have a film study, and when I tell you he's breaking every play down like he's a mad scientist, like he's Albert Einstein in terms of 4-3 packages, he is that. He's amazing with his mind when it comes to football. And that's where he's kind of one track in that way. He's looking to get into the NFL. Now for Latimer, he's he's a physical beast. He's mentally, he has that alpha male mentality. Let's get it. When he's named to the starting spot, there's a scene where he basically bashes his head through his own car window and goes, "Seat at the table. Pretty much I'm with the big boys." So he's really intense. Now, he's not as technically refined as a player as Mac. There's moments in the film in which you see him blow a play, get blocked completely, not even make the tackle. Get broke, all that by the running back, all type of stuff. But he's definitely he's mentally locked in. He wants to be there. But the thing with him is, what enhances his ability physically is the steroid abuse. Now, what the movie does, which again is somewhat of them kind of giving you an idea of what kind of goes on, is that it does show you, how Latimer abuses this substance and gets away with it through the use of fake urine. This has all been kind of unraveled and detailed by other players and former players and all that. So these are things that happen. So he uses the fake urine for a few weeks. He gets away with it, but eventually it comes back in another way because he's at a party and he assaults a young woman, for reasons. Again, that might get me in trouble if I say it right here, but you kind of understand what I'm saying. And a part of that had to do with the anger and the extra testosterone, which manifests itself in those type of actions when you abuse this thing. And eventually the coaching staff will find out about his abuse, and they would want to, well, at least the head coach would want to suspend him for the entire rest of the season. But the defensive coordinator was like, nah, this might affect the draft stock, and he was looking out for him. And it ends up being a situation where he's suspended for just 3 games. Now both of them. Oh, and this is before I let Latimer go. There is a quote that he said that's very impactful because again it's reflective of some of these other players that you ended up finding out about who really abused these things, such as Tony Mandarich. His character would go on to say, "You do what you have to do to play," and that's indicative of that mentality, doing whatever needs to be done, no matter what it is. If it means injecting something, if it means, ingesting something, going harder than the other man in the weight room, which Latimer was doing. Yes, he was working harder than any guy to be in shape, but you have to also remember that he had this other, help with him inside of him. Now both of them, they will both see their career, their college football career, come to an end around the same time. And it's both for both of them. It's kind of in like a really poignant, somber type of situation. For Mac, he would basically shatter. Well, yeah, he would shatter his knee in the second to the last game of the year. Now, what's so impactful about this is because I mentioned he was a one-track person. Now, in that scene in the film study where he's breaking down all these different plays, showing you just where his mind is at. It was so brilliant to see, but at the same time, you also realize in other scenes where he was in the study hall where he just couldn't get anything right with the tutor. He just was he just didn't care. He wasn't paying attention. He was so intent on getting to the NFL that that's all his mind could ever fathom. And with that career ending injury, he's stuck. And you see him in the last scenes of the movie where he goes back home and they play the final game of the year. Like I said, he injures himself in the second to last game of the year. So he's at home all the way. When I say he's back at home, not in the dorm, he's all the way back home with his mom. And he's watching the game with his cast on. And he doesn't know what will happen with his future. And mind you, you think maybe, if he would have, maybe why not become a coach? Why not become a coach at Eastern? Why not, try to do something with the university? Well, you have to have the degree and the credits and all that. You have to be a graduate assistant, right? Graduate assistant, right? So he wasn't thinking about grades. And it sucks. But there was plenty of players. I don't think it's so much like that anymore, but there's a lot of players, particularly in those times, that were so NFL or NBA minded that if something happened, it's over. Like, for example, another example, this is on the high school level, but we go back to the story of Friday Night Lights and Boobie Miles. He's a great running back, and then one play happens, he injures his leg. That's that's it. Because he can't go to college on football. They're not going to float him in, because that's obviously what they were doing to some of these guys. They're just floating them by. And if you can't play football, you're done. So the movie does a good job of kind of showcasing that and that, despair of that unknowing. And we mentioned with Latimer, his tower moment will come later on in the movie as well at the end of the final game. Now everybody's celebrating. They're going to the ball game, but he's stuck on the sideline on the bench. Just kind of sulking. Now, what happens before all this is the coach once again finds out that he is abusing steroids in game. You can just kind of look in his eyes, kind of can tell. And, that pretty much means for Latimer, he's done for the ball game. So he's done for the rest of the season. And I originally just looked at it like, oh man, that's why he said he can't play in the final game of the year, the actual ball game. But on the second review of the movie, I realized, he was a senior. I forgot all about his draft, him wanting to be drafted. And what he realizes right there in that moment is that he won't be successful in the NFL unless he uses steroids, which is going to lead him down this cycle of, he might be successful for a minute. He might have, he might find a roster spot, but the minute he gets caught, what's going to happen? He might get cut. He might get extra scrutiny. He might have to stop using, and again, he gets exposed as not being as good of a player. And I didn't see that on the first time around. Again, I was so caught up on him being caught and, again, not being able to play the game. I just said, okay, that's it. That's the end of it all. But in reality, no, that he's a senior. And he wanted to go to the draft. He knows in his own eyes that he cannot play without being on steroids. And again, it's just going to keep him in this, like I mentioned, that cycle of being caught and, having the media on his ass, maybe even being kicked out of the NFL. He had to think about that right there. So again, we have all these stories being showcased. I think the plot did a great job of blending them all together. And again, it shows two things that I did see is the resilience of the main characters, Darnell and also Joe, just pushing themselves to the next level and staying again, things happen, particularly with Joe, because again, there's scenes where, he lets the anxiety gets the best of him. He's playing chicken with trains, all type of stuff. So we see just the descent of where you can go. But I think what comes with that, and what us as guys, I think, could look at is the relationships that they built with the women in the movie. Again, this is a movie and all that, but again, there's positive things to be said from that. There's a message to be had from that, and both of those women held those guys accountable. Camille held Joe accountable for his actions. She didn't let him blame his father, blame his situation, blame the media. He had to be the one to stand up and look in the mirror and deal with it. She helped bring that. Of course, he has to do it. All I'm saying is that she helps reveal that to him. Now, Autumn and Darnell, they had a wacky, relationship to start off with. Again, she wasn't too sure of whether she liked this guy or not. Because again, her father was the Uncle Phil type, really conservative. She didn't know how that would come off to her father, but she still had feelings enough for this guy to stay by this guy and hold him accountable for his grades, his not financial, but eventually financial development, but for right now, his educational development. She stayed in his ass when he didn't want to take school seriously. Those are the things that you look out for with people. Not just a lover, but just friends and family. If your family don't care about what you're going through, if they, oh man, you're struggling, you gotta go. Because Joe had legitimate issues. He had anxiety. And he'd come home and he'd want to talk to his dad. His daddy didn't give a fuck. But Camille did. That's what matters. A lot of his partners on the team did want to talk to him, was able to be there for him. He had to be able to look outside himself and say, who's around me for real, and to hell with who's not there. You see what I'm saying? He had to get through that. Darnell had to let a lot of his, his insecurities, or his, not necessarily insecurities for him, but he's a little bit more cocky, and thinking, oh, I could just play football. But he had to mature himself and focus on school. Autumn made sure that, every week when they talked, when he wanted to get into getting, he would spit his game out and she would go, no, focus on work. Now, again, they would develop a relationship, but he had to develop himself first and understand what his true goal was. Just like Joe Kane, him and Camille damn near broke up, but he had to realize me being healthy is what's going to promote this new relationship, what's going to make me a better human being and a better man. Changes that you make. But sometimes they are helped and they are spearheaded by other people. So always be knowledgeable of that. And I think that's what this, in a way, part of the story goes to show you. Also, some other things that I wanted to touch up on that it does show you that I did like was the alumni presence, aka the boosters, their donations. There's a scene where they're at this party and all these different people are giving these, well, they're rich people, of course, and they're giving the players different amounts of money in these envelopes. And Darnell is like, man, what the hell is this? Should I even be taking this? This is NCAA violations. And Alvin, of course, is the first person to tell him, oh, hell no, you're supposed to accept that. Matter of fact, give me yours since you ain't all with it anyway. So again, you have that, and then you have scandal. Like I mentioned before, you had Latimer abusing, the testing system through his means. That was some drama. But then you also have the coach's daughter involved in some drama with the backup quarterback. She gets caught cheating on the test for him. They both get expelled, although they had to bring back the backup.
This guy loves anything that wears a skirt. This little rat bastard.
Yeah, but again, you see that going on here. But then you also see the presence of the media as well. Sports Illustrated. From the beginning, they highlight Joe Kane as the Heisman candidate. Fully making you aware just of the media presence and how it, it affects the players. And again, just by him being there, on the cover and saying Heisman and all this, it would challenge his mind, or it would put him in a state of, oh man, I gotta perform, I gotta, do this, and I gotta be the best every time. And in fact, lead to some more of that anxiety, as we mentioned. And then finally, one thing that I did like was the Heisman interview itself, where Kane was on campus. And originally, Lynn Swan, who makes a cameo, is asking him this question, kind of, what's your mindset going into this big game? And at first, Kane really breaks it down and goes, "This is how I feel. I'm a little bit nervous, a little bit this. I am ready to play, but it's just a lot of this going on." And then it was one of the, I guess, the PR officials for the school, working with through the Heisman, whatever. She stops the whole interview and goes, "No, no, 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 Joe. You have to say this. Keep it short and simple. You have to be as comfortable as possible and project as much, I guess you would say, confidence as possible." And what you see is a completely different interview, or response to that question when you see that scene play out later. And I just think, like, wow, this is all, again, don't get me wrong, like, they really want to showcase the player, but they really truly want to drive a narrative with this player as well. You can't just be a player. You have to project some sort of narrative, which is very interesting, to say the least. All right, y'all. If you liked what you saw today, please be sure to like and subscribe. I also got some new stuff coming out on my podcast as well, and that is available on Spotify if you haven't checked that out yet.
Their standard 4-3.
Hey, 23? Don't think I don't recognize you, poop butt motherfucker. Hey, pay attention when I'm talking to you, nigga.
What?